I'd like to tell you a story about my friend Buck. I know I've told you all about Buck. This was the time that Buck and I made a bet, a wager against each other, and we both won. Buck and I were spending the day up on the Wallkill River in northern New Jersey, bass fishing. Now, if you don't know anything about the Wallkill River, it's a wild, crazy river. It's not wild in the sense that the water is running fast. It's a slow-moving river. But you see, the Delaware River and the Hudson River flow south. And the Wallkill River flows right between them. But it's stubborn. It's obstinate. It doesn't flow south. It flows north. And if you get up to the Wallkill River, and I know what you're thinking about, there ain't no wild place in New Jersey. There is. If you get to the Wallkill River and you canoe on it or you walk, you won't see another person. You won't see a house. You'll see lots of trees, lots of wildlife. It is a wild place. Well, anyway, Buck and I were up there one day bass fishing. And he was instructing me on the best places to drop your line, where the bass like to hang out, when suddenly he grabbed my arm. Hey, don't move. Shh, quiet. Look over there. I looked. There, across the river on the opposite bank, looking away from us, was a bullfrog. But it wasn't just any bullfrog. This was the biggest bullfrog I have ever seen in my life. It might as well have been a bulldog. It was so big. And then Buck said, look over there, look. And there, slipping and sliding, slithering on the surface of the water, was a snake. And it was a big snake. I couldn't believe how fat and round it was. And then I looked at how long. Oh my goodness, that snake was longer than I am tall. And then my buddy Buck said, watch that snake. He's going after that frog. And I said, no, nothing could eat that. Look how big that frog is. And my buddy Buck said, he's going to watch. And sure enough, that snake was sneaking slowly and silently, and then suddenly, snap! He grabbed onto the back of that frog. Well, that frog, he was caught unawares, and he started to struggle. But you know, once a snake gets a hold of you, its teeth are curved backwards, and once it grabs on, it's gotta eat you. It can't do anything else. That snake couldn't get loose, but it was struggling, and that snake was fighting to hang on. And that snake's tail swung around, whipped right in front of that frog's mouth, and that frog opened his mouth and grabbed onto the end of the snake's tail. Well, Buck was beside himself. He was slapping his knee. I never seen anything like this. He was excited. I do believe that frog is gonna eat that snake. I looked at Buck and said, oh, come on, Buck. No frog can eat a snake. That snake's gonna eat the frog. And he says, no, I'm sure that frog's gonna eat it. And we argued, and finally Buck said, why don't you put your money where your mouth is? I'll make a bet. How much? I said. $20. I said, okay. I bet the snake is gonna eat the frog. And Buck said, and I bet the frog is gonna eat the snake. And so we sat down to watch. And little by little, that snake's mouth got a little bit higher on the frog. And little by little, the frog would open his mouth and swallow. Open his mouth and swallow. And little by little, that snake's body was going down the frog. Well, we sat there for a while when we got hungry, and I pulled my backpack out and opened it up and ate my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and Buck took out from his great big duffel bag that he had dragged along, he pulled out the butt end of a baked ham. and he began nibbling and nibbling and nibbling until he was down to the bone. And then he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out one of them rotisserie chickens that you get at the shop, right? You know, already cooked. And he began chewing and chewing and chewing. He chewed out the bones and spit them out. I said, Buck, you got an appetite. When he reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a bag, he says, oh, it's a good thing I stopped at the McDonald's. I said, what, you're going to eat more? He says, just a dozen of those little sliders. And one by one, he slid those sliders right down his gullet. Well, after we got done eating, we watched those two animals. And again, that snake was working on the frog, and the frog was working on the snake when we were getting kind of sleepy sitting here in the sun. So we laid back and just fell asleep for a while, dozed off. And when we woke up, we looked. We couldn't believe what we saw. That snake had eaten half the frog, and that frog had eaten half the snake. Well, we watched for a while, and after a while, we got kind of bored, so I pulled out the book that I had brought along with me, and it was a Harry Potter book, the third one of the series, and I started to read. My buddy Buck, he pulled out a book from his duffel bag, and I looked over. What are you reading here, Buck? And he showed me the title. Übermensch? Friedrich Nietzsche? Friedrich Nietzsche, Buck corrected. Oh yeah, Nietzsche. I said, Buck, you like Nietzsche? And Buck thought for a moment, and he said, well, he's a bit pedantic, but a pretty smart guy. Anyway, we read until the sun was just going down, and it was too dark to read, so we put our books away, and we sat there and watched. And in that dim light, we could not believe that snake had worked his way up to the point where he had eaten the entire frog except the frog's head. And the frog had eaten the entire snake except for the snake's head. So we sat there watching and squinting our eyes in the dim light. And then I blinked. Hey, Buck, what happened? And Buck was laughing and laughing. You didn't see that? You didn't see? I said, see what? See what? I can't believe it, Buck said. That snake opened its mouth and the frog opened its mouth at the same time. They both swallowed. They both ate each other up. And it was true. I looked. They were both gone. The frog had eaten the snake, and the snake had eaten the frog. They had both eaten the other completely up. Well, I went into my wallet and I said, Buck, you were right. The frog ate the snake. Here's $20. And he looked at me and said, well, you were right too. The snake ate the frog. Here's $20. So that's how Buck and I made a bet against each other, and we both won. If you don't believe me, get up to the Sussex Airport pub, sit down there and order a beer and take your time. Sooner or later, my buddy Buck will show up, buy him a beer, and you could ask him yourself.